My name's Luke, I'm 28, and last weekend was supposed to be one of the biggest nights of my life. After 5 years of grinding at a job I once thought would eat me alive, I'd finally gotten the promotion I'd been working toward. Senior project manager, corner office, big pay bump, and for once, recognition for the insane hours I'd been putting in. I didn't throw parties often, but I decided to make an exception. I booked a private room at my favorite restaurant, invited my parents, my younger brother, and a few close friends. In my head, it was going to be this warm, slightly emotional night. One of those rare family moments where everyone sets aside their usual bickering and just celebrates together. I couldn't have been more wrong. From the moment they walked in, I could tell the mood was off. My mom was on her phone, barely glancing up when she hugged me, and my dad had that expression he gets when he's about to say something cutting. My younger brother, Mark, was wearing a hoodie and joggers, like he'd been dragged there against his will. I brushed it off and tried to stay upbeat. After all, this was my night. The drinks started flowing, the appetizers came out, and I was finally starting to relax until my dad raised his glass and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Well, we're only here because Mark didn't have plans tonight." He chuckled like it was a harmless joke, but my stomach dropped. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting, but I could feel my face getting hot. My mom smirked and added, "Don't get used to this attention, Luke, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." The table laughed. Even Mark cracked a grin, like this was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. I just sat there, holding my glass, nodding like I was in on the joke, but inside, something shifted. It wasn't just a one-off comment. It was years of this. Years of them treating my wins like they were accidents, like I was just lucky. Growing up, every time I brought home good grades, my dad would say, "Books don't mean much in the real world." When I got my first job, my mom said, "Well, we'll see how long you last." Mark could do no wrong. He was the golden child, the one they bragged about at family gatherings. I was just there, the reliable, boring one, the one they called when they needed help moving furniture or someone to dog sit. I kept the conversation light for the rest of the dinner, cracking jokes with my friends and asking everyone about their week, but I noticed the pattern. Every time someone congratulated me, my parents downplayed it. "He's just lucky the old manager quit," my dad said once. "He probably got promoted because no one else wanted the job," Mark chimed in, and my mom laughed like that was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. The whole night, I played along, smiling quietly, even though each comment landed like a stone in my chest. I'd spent so long trying to earn their approval, and now, with this major milestone, I realized they weren't ever going to give it. They didn't see me the way I wanted them to. Maybe they never had. The thing is, this promotion wasn't just a title. It came with something else. A project I'd been spearheading for months had just been picked up by a major publication. There was going to be a feature in the Sunday paper, front page of the business section, photos, interviews, the whole deal. Everyone in the company knew about it, but my family had no idea. I hadn't told them. I wanted to see their genuine reaction. I wanted them to see me, maybe for the first time ever. So I kept quiet through dinner, letting them think this was small, letting them think I was still the same Luke they could laugh at. When dessert came, my dad made one more comment, something about how I shouldn't let this go to my head. My mom said I'd better not start acting too important, and Mark just grinned and asked if my raise was enough to finally buy a decent car, like the one he'd been eyeing. I just smiled, paid the check for the whole table, which no one thanked me for, and said, "I'm just glad you all came." They thought I was being humble. In reality, I was already picturing tomorrow morning, picturing them waking up to see my face in the paper, seeing the headline about the project that was already getting national attention. I imagined my dad's face when the family group chat blew up, when everyone from cousins to family friends started congratulating me publicly. That thought was the only thing that kept me calm as I said my goodbyes and drove home that night. Because as much as their words hurt, I realized I was past the point of trying to win them over with arguments or explanations. I was done defending myself. I was done begging them to be proud. They were going to find out who I'd become whether they liked it or not. And the way they treated me tonight was going to make that moment hit even harder. And as I lay in bed, phone buzzing with texts from my coworkers who couldn't wait to see tomorrow's feature, I stared at the ceiling and let myself smile for real. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I set an alarm, but because I was too wired to sleep properly. It felt almost childish, like waking up on Christmas morning as a kid. The sun was barely up, but I could already hear my phone vibrating on the nightstand with notifications. My coworkers were sending me pictures of the paper, tagging me on LinkedIn, posting screenshots on Instagram stories. There it was, my face on the front page of the business section, headline in bold letters. Local project manager leads groundbreaking initiative bringing millions in revenue. The article talked about how I'd taken a failing project and turned it into one of the company's biggest wins in years. There was a photo of me standing with my team, all of us grinning, and a quote they'd pulled where I'd said, "This is just the beginning. We're building something that will outlast all of us." I stared at it for a long time before I finally sent it to the family group chat. No caption, just the picture. Then I set my phone down and waited. The first response came from my aunt, who wasn't even at the party last night. "Luke, front page? We are so proud of you." Then my cousin chimed in. "Bro, this is huge. Can I brag about you to my friends?" The notifications kept coming, but not a single one from my parents or Mark. I knew they'd seen it. My mom had read receipts on, and I could see the little "seen" icon under my message. Nothing, not even a thumbs up emoji. By mid-morning, I decided to call. Mom answered, her voice as casual as if I'd called to ask what was for dinner. "Oh, hi, Luke. Did you see the paper?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes, we saw it. Your father says it's nice, but you know how the media exaggerates things. Don't let it get to your head." I actually laughed out loud. "Exaggerates? Mom, it's literally just reporting the facts. The numbers in there are straight from the quarterly reports." "Well," she said with a sigh, "it's just, you don't want to make your brother feel bad. He's been really stressed about his job lately. Seeing you get all this attention might." I cut her off. "Wait, are you seriously worried about how Mark feels right now?" Her voice got that clipped, defensive edge I knew too well. "You know how sensitive he is, Luke. It's not about you. It's about keeping the peace. Your father and I don't want drama." I bit back everything I wanted to say and just hung up. Not 10 minutes later, Mark texted me privately. "Cool article. Guess they'll give those to anyone now. LOL. That was when something in me snapped. I'd been putting up with this for years, letting their words roll off me, trying to stay the bigger person. But now I realized it wasn't about being bigger or smaller. It was about how much I was willing to let them take from me. And right then, it felt like they were trying to take this win away too, trying to dull the shine before I even got a chance to feel proud. The next few days only made things worse. My parents didn't bring it up once. Not when I came over for Sunday dinner. Not when family friends mentioned it in passing. Not when my grandma literally teared up telling me how proud she was. Instead, my dad started making digs about how I must be working too much. "You'll burn out soon," he said, like it was inevitable. "This whole thing probably won't last." Companies change their minds all the time. Mark, of course, doubled down. He started bragging about how he'd just gotten a small bonus at his job and made sure to say it in front of me, like it was some kind of competition. When our uncle congratulated me at dinner, Mark jumped in with, "Yeah, but Luke barely has a social life anymore. What's the point of money if you don't have anyone to spend it with?" Everyone laughed, everyone except me. It was like they were all in on this unspoken agreement to pull me back down whenever I tried to rise. And the more I stayed quiet, the more they pushed. Then came the text from my mom that nearly sent me over the edge. "Hey, we were thinking, since you're doing so well now, maybe you can help Mark out with his car payment this month. He's had a rough time, and it would mean a lot to us. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just a request for money." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "No." She called me immediately, her voice sharp. "Luke, don't be selfish. Family helps family. You can't just sit on your money while your brother struggles." "I'm not sitting on it," I said. "And I'm not responsible for his bills. He's 25. He can figure it out." Her tone softened, but only slightly. "You know he's not as good with money as you are. We just thought you could step up." I didn't say what I was really thinking. That stepping up was all I'd ever done. That I'd been the one who fixed their leaky roof when they couldn't afford a contractor, who loaned Mark money when he lost his job last year and never saw a cent back, who made sure everyone had nice Christmas presents even when I was broke. I just said, "I'm not doing it," and hung up. That week, the family group chat went suspiciously quiet. No memes from Mark, no updates from Mom about what she was cooking, no passive-aggressive jokes from Dad. just silence. And instead of feeling guilty, like I might have a few years ago, I felt something else, a strange, buzzing clarity. They were never going to treat me the way I wanted them to just because I asked nicely. They were never going to respect me unless they were forced to. And now, for the first time in my life, I actually had the power to do that. But I didn't act right away. I let the tension sit there, growing heavier each day, until even my friends started to notice. Dude, what's going on with your family? One of them asked after I ignored a call from my mom. Nothing, I said with a smile. Just letting them show me who they really are. And as the next company event approached, an event where I was going to be speaking in front of reporters, shareholders, and pretty much every big name in the city, I started to think about how I wanted them to see me. Not just as the kid they used to laugh at. Not just as the reliable older son who would always pick up the pieces. I wanted them to see me the way everyone else was starting to see me. And I wanted it to hurt. 2 weeks later, the company hosted its quarterly investor dinner, a big, glossy event at the downtown hotel ballroom. I'd been asked to give a short speech about the project's success and where we were headed next. It was the kind of thing people in my field worked years to get invited to, and now I wasn't just attending, I was one of the speakers. I didn't invite my family, not because I didn't want them there, but because I wanted the moment to belong to me. I wanted to be surrounded by people who actually respected me, people who knew how hard I'd worked. But apparently someone else decided differently. I walked into the ballroom, feeling good for the first time in weeks, and froze. Sitting at one of the round tables near the front were my parents and Mark. My parents were dressed nicely. Mom in one of her special occasion blouses, Dad in the blazer he wore to weddings. Mark, of course, had shown up in a polo and jeans, looking bored. I made my way over, keeping my voice level. "What are you doing here?" Mom smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Your aunt told us about this dinner. We thought it would be nice to support you." "Support me?" "Right." I forced a smile and nodded, then excused myself to mingle with some of my colleagues. For a while, I managed to ignore them. I took photos with the other project leads, chatted with the CEO, and kept reminding myself this was my night. Then it happened. I was standing near the buffet when I heard my father's voice. Loud. Too loud. He was talking to one of the senior partners, someone I'd been trying to impress for months. "Oh, Luke's always been the smart one," my dad said. And for a brief, foolish second, I felt a flicker of pride. But then he kept talking. "But honestly, he's terrible with people. We were shocked when we heard he got this role. Thought maybe they were just desperate." The partner gave a polite laugh, clearly uncomfortable, but my dad wasn't done. "You know, he still calls us all the time asking what to do. We have to keep him grounded, or he'd be unbearable. He can get carried away." I felt my stomach drop, like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I didn't even realize I was moving until I was standing right there, right behind them. The partner looked at me, clearly mortified. My dad just smiled, like nothing was wrong. "Luke, we were just talking about you." I forced a tight smile, excused the partner, and pulled my dad aside. "What was that?" I hissed under my breath. He shrugged. "Just making conversation. You don't want these people thinking you're some kind of hotshot. A little humility is good for you." I couldn't even respond. I just walked away, my hands shaking. I didn't think the night could get worse. But then I saw Mark at the bar, talking to two of my coworkers, including the woman I'd been quietly seeing for the past few months. He was laughing, holding court, and I caught just enough of the conversation to make my blood run cold. "Oh yeah, Luke's always been kind of awkward. Used to get picked on in high school. Total nerd. I'm actually surprised he even got a girlfriend. Good for him. Though, maybe he won't work himself to death now." They laughed. My girlfriend's smile faltered, like she wasn't sure whether to join in, but Mark just kept going. "He's not as smooth as he thinks." I stepped in before he could finish. "Mark. Outside. Now." He smirked like this was all a game, but followed me out to the hotel lobby. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "What?" He shrugged. "Just talking. Relax. Everyone knows you take yourself too seriously. I'm just making you sound relatable." "Relatable? You're trashing me in front of my coworkers." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. You act like you're some big deal now. We have to keep you grounded." Mom and Dad said the same thing. "You've been getting a little full of yourself." That did it. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just looked at him for a long, silent moment and said, "You don't get to decide who I am anymore." Then I turned and walked back inside, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. The rest of the night was a blur. I got through my speech, somehow, and people applauded, but it felt hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about what they'd done. They hadn't just embarrassed me. They'd undermined me in front of the very people I needed to trust me. And then came the final blow. The next morning, I got a call from HR. One of the senior partners had filed a note saying he was concerned about my ability to handle pressure because of what he'd heard my father say. Nothing serious, they assured me, but it was a black mark on my record nonetheless, something that would live in my file for months. That was when I stopped trying to play nice. Because in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about last night. It wasn't about the promotion party or the article or even the car payment they wanted me to cover. This was a pattern. They weren't just unsupportive, they were actively sabotaging me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't call them. I didn't text them. I went silent. When they reached out, I ignored them. When Mark sent me a sarcastic meme, I left him on red. And as the days turned into a week, I started to plan. Not revenge. Not yet. But something. Something that would make them see me for who I really was. And finally, painfully, understand what they'd done. The silence was louder than anything they had ever said to me. For the first few days after the investor dinner, I told myself I was just cooling off. That maybe if I took some time away, I'd be able to come back with a clearer head and not let their words get under my skin. But the truth was, I wasn't just cooling off, I was retreating. Pulling back piece by piece from a family I'd spent my whole life trying to keep close. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. At first, Mom texted me in that passive-aggressive way she does. "No dinner this week? Grandma was asking about you." I didn't answer. A few hours later, "Hope you're okay." The next day, "Luke, this is getting childish. Just talk to us." But I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to. Because here's what nobody really talks about when it comes to family betrayal. It's not just anger you feel. It's grief. I would wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every little moment from the investor dinner, from the promotion party, from years ago when Dad said I'd never be a people person, when Mom told me not to get my hopes up about college, when Mark laughed at my first car and told everyone at school it was Luke's loser mobile. It was like all those memories had been living under the floorboards of my brain, and now the trapdoor had swung open and they were pouring out all at once. I started staying later at the office, not because I had more work to do, but because I didn't want to go home and sit with those thoughts. I buried myself in spreadsheets, emails, planning sessions. When my team asked if I was okay, I smiled and said I was fine. I don't think any of them bought it, but they respected the space I clearly wanted. The hardest part was my girlfriend. She tried, at first, to get me to open up. One night after work, she came over with takeout and said, gently, "You've been a ghost all week. What's going on?" I almost told her everything. Almost. But instead I said, "It's just work stress. I'll be fine." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just stayed quiet, ate dinner with me, and left early. After that, she started coming around less. That was when it hit me that my family's words weren't just hurting me. They were bleeding into every other part of my life. My friendships felt thinner, my relationship was strained, and even at work, I caught myself hesitating in meetings, second-guessing my decisions because of that stupid HR note in my file. One night, sitting alone in my apartment with a cold cup of coffee and my laptop open but untouched, I realized I was spiraling. I'd always been the dependable one, the calm one, the one who kept his head when everyone else lost theirs. But right then, I felt anything but calm. I felt like I was standing on a cliff edge, waiting for someone to give me a reason not to jump. And then, something small happened that somehow made everything worse. Grandma called. She almost never called me directly. She usually went through Mom, so when I saw her name on my phone, I picked up immediately. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and a little shaky. "I just wanted to check on you. Your mother says you've been distant." I hesitated, then said, "Yeah, I guess I have. Are you okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her not to worry, but the words got stuck. "I'm figuring some things out," I finally said. There was a pause, then she said quietly, "Luke, you've always been such a good boy, always helping everyone else. But you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep this family warm." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, until I realized I was crying. Not loud, heaving sobs, just silent tears running down my face, like something inside me had cracked open. That was my rock bottom. But rock bottom has a strange clarity to it. Because once you've felt everything break, you realize you have two choices: stay broken or build something new out of the pieces. I started small. I made a list, an actual, physical list, of every time my family had dismissed me, undermined me, or asked me to put them first at my own expense. It was longer than I expected. Then I made another list, every time I'd helped them. Money I'd lent and never gotten back, favors I'd done, emergencies I'd bailed them out of. By the time I was done, I had 3 full pages. And looking at that list, I felt something shift again. Because for the first time, it was all there in black and white. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that I hadn't just been too sensitive. The next step was harder. I started saying no. When Mom texted me asking if I could pick up a new lawnmower for Dad, since you have the bigger car now, I replied, I can't. When Mark called asking if I could look over his resume because he might apply for a new job, I said, sorry, I don't have time right now. Each no felt both terrifying and electric, like I was rewiring some part of my brain that had been stuck in people-pleaser mode for decades. And while I was doing that, I started planning. I didn't know exactly what the end game would look like yet, but I knew I wanted it to be big. Not petty, not cruel, just undeniable. Something that would make them stop in their tracks and finally see me. Every night after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, sketching out ideas, making calls, quietly building towards something I wasn't ready to name out loud. The strange thing was, the more I planned, the lighter I felt. The grief was still there, but now it had somewhere to go. And deep down, I think I already knew. The next time I saw my parents and my brother, things wouldn't be the same. Not ever again. In the weeks that followed, something in me started to change, quietly at first, then all at once. It was like stepping out of a dark, windowless room and realizing the world outside was bigger and brighter than I'd let myself believe. I threw myself into work again, but this time it wasn't about hiding from my family. It was about proving something to myself. I stayed late because I wanted to, not because I was running from the silence in my apartment. I took on more responsibilities, volunteered to lead 2 new projects, and for the first time since the investor dinner, I felt that old fire again, the one that had pushed me to climb this far in the first place. And people noticed. A month after the investor dinner fiasco, my boss called me into his office. I braced myself for bad news. That HR note still gnawed at me late at night. But instead, he smiled. Luke, the board loved your speech. The partners have been impressed with how you handled the rollout. I know you've had some bumps, but you've really proved yourself these past few weeks. He handed me a document. It was an invitation to an executive retreat, the kind usually reserved for senior leadership. You're on track for bigger things, he said. I think it's time you start preparing for what's next. Walking out of that office, I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was the first tangible sign that my career wasn't just surviving. It was accelerating. The HR note hadn't sunk me. My father's comments hadn't crippled my reputation. If anything, I'd climbed higher despite them. Outside of work, my life started to expand, too. I reached out to a few old college friends I hadn't seen in years, grabbed coffee with them, and realized how much I'd missed having people in my life who knew me before all the family drama became the center of everything. We started meeting up on weekends, hikes, game nights, the kind of low-key fun that reminded me who I was outside of being the responsible older brother. Even my relationship, which had been hanging by a thread, started to recover. One evening, after a long day, I sat my girlfriend down and told her everything. The promotion party, the investor dinner, the way my family had been slowly grinding me down for years. She listened, really listened, then took my hand and said, Luke, you don't have to carry them forever. You get to choose what kind of family you want in your life. It was such a simple statement, but it felt like a door swinging open in my chest. I started taking better care of myself, too. I joined a gym near the office, something I'd been putting off forever, and forced myself to go 3 times a week. At first it was miserable. I was sore, exhausted, and completely uncoordinated. But soon I started to see changes. My shoulders straightened, my energy came back, and people began commenting that I looked different, lighter, stronger. And maybe I did. Because with each small win, each project milestone, each new social plan, each morning I woke up without that tight knot of dread in my chest. I felt like I was reclaiming something I'd lost. Meanwhile, my family seemed increasingly baffled by my distance. Mom sent a few messages trying to guilt me into visiting. You haven't seen Grandma in weeks. Your father feels hurt that you're ignoring him. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt oddly calm reading them. I wasn't ignoring them to punish them. I was just choosing not to engage until I was ready. Mark tried a different tactic. He sent me a text one Friday night. Hey, some of us are at the bar if you want to join. I didn't respond. The next day, he followed up. You're acting weird. Whatever this is about, just get over it. That one made me laugh out loud. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't want to get over it. I wanted to hold on to this clarity for a little while longer. Then, the perfect opportunity came along. Almost like fate was giving me the setup I'd been waiting for. The company announced that the next quarter's results were going to be presented at a public press conference. Not just numbers on a slide deck, an actual event with local reporters, business influencers, and city officials in attendance. And I wasn't just attending. I'd been asked to be one of the keynote speakers, right after the CEO. This wasn't just another investor dinner. This was the kind of event that made headlines, the kind that would get live coverage in the business section's online stream. As soon as I saw the email, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I started preparing my speech meticulously, working with the PR team to make sure it hit every note. I booked a new suit, something sharp and tailored that made me look like I belonged up there on that stage. I even reached out to a photographer to get professional headshots done, something I'd been meaning to do for months, but never made time for. The closer the event got, the more my confidence grew. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about showing myself how far I'd come. About standing on that stage and knowing that every person in the room, including, hopefully, my parents and brother, would have no choice but to see me differently. Because this time, I was going to make sure they were there. I was going to send them invitations myself, with their names on them, and watch them sit in that audience while I took the stage. And when the cameras flashed, when the reporters scribbled notes, when my words echoed through that room, they were going to know, without me saying a single thing, that the son and brother they used to laugh at wasn't someone they could control anymore. Not with guilt, not with jokes, not with their approval or their silence. For the first time in my life, I was in control of the story, and I was going to make sure it had their full attention. The first thing I did was secure their attendance, but not by asking, and definitely not by begging. I wanted them there because they chose to come, not because I guilt them into it. I needed them to feel like they were walking into just another normal event, not a setup. So I sent a group text to my parents and Mark. Hey, my company is holding a public quarterly conference next month. I'm one of the keynote speakers. There will be food, drinks, the works. Thought you might want to come see what I've been working on. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a clean, simple invitation. Mark replied first. Free food? Guess I can show up. Mom's response came a few minutes later. We'll be there. Your father says it'll be nice to see what you do all day. The subtext was clear. They still thought of this as Luke's little office job, something cute to pat me on the head for. Perfect. With them locked in, I shifted my focus to making the moment as undeniable as possible. The PR team had already been working with me on my speech, but I asked if we could include visuals, not just slides with numbers, but photos of the team, graphs of the revenue growth I'd driven, screenshots of the national coverage we'd received. The communications director lit up. Absolutely, she said. We want this to be a showcase. You're the face of this project now, lean into that. I didn't say it out loud, but inside, I thought exactly. Every night after work, I practiced my speech until I could deliver it without looking at a single card. I watched TED Talks to study how the best speakers commanded a room, how they used pauses and eye contact to hold an audience's attention. I worked on my posture, my breathing, even the way I walked onto the stage. If my family was going to be there, I wasn't just going to give a speech. I was going to own that room. But the setup wasn't just about the event. Around this time, I made a quiet but deliberate move that no one outside of work knew about. I started consulting on the side. Word had spread about my project's success, and a smaller tech startup reached out asking if I'd be willing to advise them on their launch strategy. At first, I hesitated. I was already busy enough, but something about the timing felt right. Within a few weeks, I was spending 2 evenings a week with their team, helping them avoid the pitfalls I'd learned to navigate the hard way. It wasn't glamorous work, but they treated me like I was indispensable, And for the first time, I felt what it was like to be seen as an authority outside of my company. They even offered me equity in exchange for my time. Not a huge percentage, but enough to make me a stakeholder if the company took off. The old me would have kept this to myself, quietly working and waiting for it to pay off before mentioning it to anyone. The new me started documenting the process, not for social media, but for myself. Photos of whiteboards, late-night brainstorming sessions, milestones we hit. I was building a record, proof that everything I was doing was intentional. The more I did this, the more my confidence solidified. I started realizing just how much of my life had been shaped around waiting for my family's approval, and just how little I needed it now. Still, a part of me couldn't help but think about the moment they'd see it all. One evening, about 2 weeks before the conference, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. She smiled in that tight way she does when she's trying to play nice. "Luke," she said, as if she'd just bumped into a casual acquaintance. "We're looking forward to this thing you're doing." I just nodded. "Good. I think you'll enjoy it." Then she added, "Your father was saying maybe you'll finally let us see the office. After the event." It took everything in me not to laugh. My father, who had stood in front of a senior partner and told him I wasn't good with people, now wanted a tour of my workplace like a proud dad. "We'll see," I said with a small smile, because I already knew what was coming after the event, and it was going to be a lot bigger than a casual office tour. Meanwhile, Mark tried to pull his usual routine, asking me a week before the conference if I could spot him a couple hundred, because his car had broken down. This time, I didn't even respond. When he followed up with, "Wow, you really think you're too good for us now?" I simply replied, "No, I just have other priorities." It was a short text, but it felt like a line being drawn in permanent marker. And just to make sure there were no surprises, I quietly asked the event organizers to reserve seats for my family, right near the front, where they'd have the clearest view of the stage and the screens. I even had name cards printed for them, something usually reserved for city officials and board members. When the day of the conference finally arrived, everything felt sharper: the air, the lights, even my own heartbeat. I stood backstage in my new suit, holding the microphone in one hand and my note cards in the other, though I didn't need them anymore. From where I stood, I could see the audience filling in. My parents arrived first, looking around like tourists, followed by Mark, who had clearly tried to dress up, but still looked like he was going to a casual dinner. They found their seats, right where I'd planned for them to be, and I could see my father's expression change slightly when he realized how close they were to the front. Good. I wanted him close. I wanted him to hear every word. When my name was announced, I walked on stage to polite applause and saw my mom lift her phone like she was going to take a video. That was the moment it hit me. They had no idea what they were about to witness. And that thought didn't make me nervous. It made me ready, because I hadn't just prepared a speech. I'd prepared a statement, one that was going to make it impossible for them to dismiss me ever again. When they called my name, the applause felt like a wave pushing me forward. I walked out into the bright lights of the ballroom, feeling my polished shoes hit the stage with a steady rhythm, the microphone warm in my hand. For a split second, I locked eyes with my parents. Mom had that practiced, neutral expression she used when she didn't want to be caught looking too impressed. Dad sat back with his arms crossed, already skeptical, like he was waiting for me to trip. Mark was scrolling on his phone, not even pretending to pay attention. Perfect. I stepped up to the podium and started with the formalities, thanking the board, the investors, the team. My voice was steady, clear, but then I shifted. I spoke about the project as more than just a set of numbers. I told the story of how it had started: a failing department, a skeleton crew of discouraged employees, and a budget that was on the verge of being cut entirely. I described the long nights, the hard decisions, and how we had turned it around, not just surviving, but thriving. As I spoke, the big screens behind me flashed through the photos we'd carefully chosen: team meetings, product milestones, headlines from the national feature, and finally, the graph. A clean upward curve showing how the project had grown under my leadership. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that means people are actually listening. Then I did something I hadn't told PR I was going to do. I stepped away from the podium and let my voice drop just enough to sound personal. When I first started working on this project, I said, there were a lot of people who thought it was doomed. Some even said I wasn't the right person for the job. But here's the thing about being underestimated: it either crushes you or it turns you into someone who refuses to quit. I chose the second option. I let that hang for a moment, scanning the audience until my eyes landed right on my dad. He was sitting up straighter now, his arms uncrossed, his expression no longer casual. Mark had finally put his phone down. I continued, calm but deliberate. "This isn't just about me," I said. "It's about every person in this room who has ever been told they weren't enough, that they were too quiet, too ambitious, too idealistic. If you've ever been doubted, take this as proof that you can turn it around. You can build something people once thought was impossible." The room broke into applause, not the polite kind this time, but the real, sustained kind that makes your chest tighten. I glanced at my family again. My mom was no longer recording. She was staring at me, her lips pressed together like she wasn't sure how to react. My dad was watching intently now, his jaw tight. Mark looked uncomfortable. Good, because this was the point of no return. I wrapped up my talk by announcing the project's newest expansion, a partnership with a national brand that would bring in millions over the next fiscal year. The announcement had been embargoed until today, so when I said it, the room buzzed with surprise. Cameras flashed, reporters started scribbling, and for a brief moment, it felt like the entire world was watching me. I smiled. "We've come a long way," I said, "and we're just getting started." When I stepped off the stage, the applause followed me all the way down. Several executives shook my hand, and a few investors even stopped me to say they wanted to discuss future opportunities. I knew my family was watching every second of this. When the presentation ended and the networking portion began, I let them come to me. Mom approached first, her expression a mix of pride and discomfort. "That was impressive, Luke," she said carefully. I just nodded. "Thanks." Dad was next. He didn't smile, but he didn't look dismissive either. "You really got them listening," he said, as if he were surprised. "That was the idea," I replied evenly. Then came Mark, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting everywhere but my face. "You looked like you knew what you were doing up there," he said finally, like the words cost him something. I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I just smiled slightly and said, "I do." Then I turned back to the cluster of executives waiting to speak with me. Because the truth was, this wasn't about winning their approval anymore. This was about making them witness it, making them sit there, front and center, and see what I had built without their help, in spite of their doubt. By the time the night ended, it was clear the dynamic had shifted. People were coming up to me all evening, shaking my hand, asking for my card, treating me like someone who mattered. My parents saw it, Mark saw it, and for once, they didn't have anything clever to say. When we finally parted ways in the parking lot, Mom gave me a quick hug. "We'll talk soon," she said softly, like she wasn't quite sure what the new rules were anymore. I just nodded and watched them walk away, feeling strangely calm. Because the revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic public shaming. It was simply forcing them to sit there and see me succeed, and realizing they couldn't minimize it, couldn't explain it away, couldn't take it from me. And I wasn't done yet. Because if they thought tonight was the peak, they were about to learn this was just the beginning. The days after the conference felt like living in a different reality. My inbox flooded with follow-ups from investors and executives, invitations to speak at smaller events, and even a couple of headhunters wanting to know if I was open to new opportunities. For the first time in my career, I wasn't chasing things. Things were chasing me. But the real shift happened with my family. It started with a message from my mom the morning after the event. "Your father and I were talking last night. We didn't realize how big a deal this was. We're proud of you." No emojis. No passive-aggressive undertone. Just a plain, simple statement. If this had been a year ago, I probably would have clung to that message like a starving man to bread. But now, I just stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Thanks. I appreciate that." I left it at that. A day later, Mark called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Look," he started, awkward as ever. "I know I give you a hard time. But that was actually pretty cool. What you did. Everyone was talking about it after you left." I didn't respond right away, so he kept going. "I didn't know you were working on something that big. Guess I thought, I don't know, that you were just doing the same old boring stuff." "It wasn't boring," I said quietly. "I know," he admitted. There was a long pause. Then, "I think I might try to get serious about my job. You know, stop messing around." I almost laughed at the irony. Years of them telling me I was the one who needed to be humbled, and now Mark was the one having an epiphany. Good idea, I said simply. It's about time. When Sunday rolled around, I decided to show up for dinner, not because I felt guilty, but because I wanted to see them face to face now that everything had shifted. The moment I walked in, I could feel it. The atmosphere was different. No snide comments about work. No backhanded jokes. My dad actually stood up from the couch, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Beer's in the fridge if you want one." Mom fussed over the food, offering me the first plate instead of giving it to Mark. Even my brother was quieter, more thoughtful, like he was trying to figure out where he fit in this new version of things. And I didn't gloat. I didn't throw their past words back in their faces. I just sat at the table, calm and steady, and let them come to me. Halfway through the meal, my dad cleared his throat. "I was wrong," he said simply. The whole table went silent. "About what I said at the dinner. About what I said to your partner. You're not the same kid you used to be." I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I know." He nodded back, like that was enough, and for once it was. Because the power wasn't in their apology. It was in knowing I didn't need it to feel whole. After dinner, I stepped outside, breathing in the cool air, feeling something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. My phone buzzed, a message from the startup I'd been consulting for. "Big news, funding round closed. You officially own 3% of the company. Congrats, partner." I couldn't help but laugh. There it was, the final piece. Because while my family was just now realizing who I'd become, I was already 2 steps ahead, building something even bigger. When I walked back inside, Mom asked what I was smiling about. "Oh," I said casually, slipping my phone back into my pocket. "Just thinking about how next quarter's going to be even better." They didn't ask what I meant, but I saw the look on their faces, that flicker of realization that I was no longer the person they could keep small. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain. I just grabbed my jacket, said goodnight, and left them sitting there, quietly wondering how much more there was about me they didn't know yet. And that, I realized as I got in my car, was the best revenge of all, because they finally saw me, really saw me, and there was no going back. I smiled to myself, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them to sit with that thought. This time, I wasn't the one who had to catch up. They were, and they knew it.